Yeah, my name is Pawan Omtri, and my wife Rachna Gangu, and we currently stay in Hyderabad, Telangana. Yeah, so name that's my daughter who passed away. She was 18, and the name is Ritaika Omtri. Yeah, Rithaik Ritaika Omtri, OMTRI. No, she was perfectly healthy.
She was in perfect, a normal child, absolutely no health condition that I don't think we even went to a doctor in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's May 29th, 2021.
No,
not
zero,
at all.
Zero.
Actually, I did consult 2 or 3 doctors for my parents, probably like 2 or 3 months before we took ours, because my parents have some health conditions. So we asked 2 or 3 doctors, and all of them said the same thing. Vaccines are totally safe, no side effects. They don't even have to worry about the current medication they were taking. And because Ritu was just a normal child, it didn't even occur to me that I have to go to a pediatrician and ask if there's any potential side effects or risks. And even at the vaccination centers, there was no information put up, nothing of any sort. It was just by word of mouth that I hear from others that you might expect high fever the next day or body pains, but that should subside within 2 days. That was the only information we had. We both, Ritu and I, got our vaccines on the 29th of May around 9:30 a.m. and we both got Covishield. And we came back home, and around 11:30 or 12 around noon is when she said her head was starting to hurt. I thought it was probably because, we haven't been out much because of the lockdown. So probably it was just the drive during the day, broad daylight. So I thought it must be just a moderate headache from that. But after lunch, she started complaining that her body was hurting, her headache was getting worse, and starting at around 4, both of us started having a fever. We were given paracetamol at the vaccination center. They said, if you have a fever, take these every 6 hours. I tried to skip it. I thought, let the body fight by itself. Why should we take the paracetamol? And I just waited. And until like 10:30 or 11 in the night, the fever went up to 102.7. Both of us had the same amount of fever, and my husband said it's not a good idea to leave it at 102.7. She needs to get some medicine. So that's when I gave her the paracetamol. In spite of giving the paracetamol, the fever didn't come back to normal. It came down to around 101.8 or 7. And even though both of us had same symptoms, I was able to at least sleep, but her body couldn't take it. She was restless the entire night. She didn't sleep. She was walking around. She was asking her dad to press her legs, press her back, press her head, because she was just restless. And next day morning again, we woke up. We couldn't eat much. And fever continued. It didn't go up to 102, but it was somewhere around 101.5. We continued to take the paracetamol once every 6 hours. So we took about 3 or 4 between the 2-3 days of having fever and headache. And by evening of the 30th, we started feeling better. There was no headache and fever was coming down. We had about close to 100. And on the following Monday, we were back to normal. Actually, I was still lingering with some weakness, but Ritu was just back to normal. And afterwards, for the next 5 days, our lives were just running smooth, just normal, no complaints. And it was on Saturday, which was June 5th, the early hours of June 5th, around 3:30 a.m., she woke up. We were sleeping on the same bed, and she woke me up saying, "Mama, my head is really hurting." And she started scratching like this. I still remember her movement. She was scratching like this, and she said, "Mama, I feel as if lice are crawling all over my head, as if bed bugs are crawling all over my head. My scalp is so itchy." I said, "Ritu, what is it? It's 3:30 in the morning, and you washed your hair today. It's probably dandruff or something. You don't have lice or there are no bed bugs." And then she asked, Mama, can you please put some hair oil for me? And it was 3:30 and I was just sleepy. I said, why don't you do it yourself? So she went downstairs. I don't think she applied oil, but my mom told me that she slept around 6:30 in the morning. And I didn't wake her up. I thought she didn't have good night's sleep. Let her sleep in. And she woke up around 12 or 12:30. This was still the 5th of June. And when she woke up, she didn't have the headache, but she said her left thumb was really sore. It was really, really sore. It was hurting. And one of the small toes on her left foot was also hurting. And the pain was so bad, she says, I might have hit one of my toes to the bed or somewhere and I might have a hairline fracture. And I didn't really trust her. Like, you were asleep the half of the day and you didn't walk around much. How could you hit something and just wake up with the pain? And she just searched herself on the internet looking for symptoms of pain in the toe. And she thought if she has a hairline fracture, then she should bandage it to the next toe so it doesn't move. So she did that for comfort. And then she started hopping on one leg when had to move from around the room. It really didn't bother me even at that time, to be honest. It didn't bother me. And earlier on the 4th of June, actually, she was helping me around with cleaning up of the house, and she was working with some old locks and keys, which were old. And I thought maybe she's usually allergic to dust, so maybe it's some allergic reaction that she's having, is what I thought.
So she had itching on the palm.
And she started saying, my fingertips are tingly and they feel numb, and my palms are kind of itchy. So I thought these are some allergic reactions. So I called the doctor around 8:30 in the evening. Because of COVID, most of the doctors are available online. So mostly I thought, let's book an appointment on Apollo 24/7. So we booked an appointment with a general physician, and I told him this is what is happening. And the first thing I always mention to the doctors is she got her vaccination 1 week back. It was exactly a week. And that just didn't seem to bother them at all. And he said, okay, maybe she has an allergic reaction. So let's give her Avil for 2 days and give her Crocin for pain. So I did that. That night we went to the pharmacy, got Avil and gave her her first dose. And he said, if it doesn't go down in 2 days, then get her blood work done. That way, sometimes it could tell us if there's an allergic reaction. And I gave her Crocin. And the next day morning when she woke up, the pain didn't get better. But there was some pain in her arms and legs now, not the entire arms, just the hands and the legs. And the itching and the burning was so severe, she would constantly hold an ice pack in her hand. I would just give her ice in a Ziploc bag and she would hold it in her hand. And she wanted me to rub her palms all the time. And when I touched her palms, they were really hot and red. So throughout the day, she suffered with this, it was all weird. I didn't know what was going on. And I waited throughout the day. In between, when I checked she felt a little warm. This was in the evening of 6th June, and she had a fever of 99.4. I thought usually below 100 is not something to be alarmed of. So I still gave her Crocin, and she said she has a mild headache. And that night again, she didn't sleep very well. It was the 7th of June, the next morning, which was Monday. And I thought it's been 2 days. I've been giving her Avil, I've been giving her Crocin, and her symptoms are not getting better. So I took her to get her blood test done. We did that in the morning. And again, she was saying my head is kind of a little bit sore. And she started noticing pink spots underneath her palm, underneath the skin. It was not very prominent, but I could tell it was different from my palm. Her palm looked pink with blotches of pink spots. So we went, and that afternoon, because she was not getting enough sleep during the night, in between she would take cat naps. She would just sit on the sofa and fall asleep. And then she didn't eat lunch because she was not feeling well. Around 4 o'clock, I got a call from the diagnostic center. And they said this, sorry, I didn't pick up the call. It was a random number, so I didn't pick it up. So they called me again around 9 in the night. And they said, we are calling from Vijaya Diagnostics. Why are you running a blood test on this patient? I said, I'm her mom, and I just wanted to check if there's an allergic reaction. The doctor said if there's some reaction, you could know in the blood test. They said, the reason we are calling you is her platelets are extremely low. They're extremely low. So can you come for a retest? At that point, the mom in me was not ready to hear. I was thinking they made a mistake. That's why they're asking us to come for a retest. And they said, we will not release the report yet because I want to run the slide throughout the night and see if anything changes till morning. So we started getting restless. They said extremely low. It was bothering me. So I called one of my friends who's a doctor. And she said, why don't you get that report tomorrow morning and come over to our office? We'll see what's going on. So we couldn't sleep very well that night. And the whole night again, Ritu was restless. Her head was hurting. The palms were really bothering her. And the pain really didn't go away yet. So next day morning, I booked another appointment with the general physician at Apollo. I wanted to take her in person. But he was not taking in-person appointments, so he switched it to a video call. And during the call, I told him she got the vaccination 1 week back, and this is what is happening from past 2-3 days. He said, no, don't worry about that. And I told at that point, Vijaya Diagnostic called me back and said, we ran the slide and it still looks at 40,000. Her platelets are at 40,000. And when I told him her platelets are low at 40,000, he said, see, you're telling me she has a pain in her thumb and the toe. So she probably is fighting a viral infection like a bone and joint.
Which viral infection, he
of
said,
the joints.
usually affects the joints and platelets can go down.
Go down because the body is fighting. So no need to be worried about. He looked at her in the video. He said her lips look pink and she looks active enough. And he asked her what she had for breakfast. And he said she seems to be alert. So don't worry. Don't go for a retest today. Wait for 1 more day. Even if the platelets go down to 30,000, I wouldn't worry. During the COVID times, the first thing we need to do is stay calm. No need to panic. No need to have any anxiety. To be honest, his words gave us comfort. You know, listening from a doctor, you don't have to worry, platelets as low as 40,000 is okay, gave me comfort. And we were like happy, okay, there's nothing to worry. So we were back to our routine. And my uncle, who's a doctor, he's a retired doctor, a surgeon, he sent me a link at that point. He said, you both got Covishield and the platelets went down to 40,000. There is a link between Covishield and platelets going down and blood clots forming in the body. When I read that article, it still didn't ring a bell. For me, I thought, why would Ritu have blood clots? Blood clots are something that happens in like senior citizens or older people. How could she have blood clots? I didn't understand or have that knowledge to understand that this could be life-threatening. And I told him, you know, the general physician, he himself told us not to panic, 40,000 is okay. So he said, okay, then watch out if she's getting any patches, red or purple color patches on her body, watch out. I said, okay. And this all happened around 11:30 in the night. Around 6 in the evening, this is 8th June, Ritu started getting a headache.
1 minute, I want to intervene. So blood clots, Covishield, AstraZeneca, it's kind of heard on the news. We heard that before, but nowhere it says life-threatening blood clots. You know, blood clot means, you know, somewhere some blood clot and
right.
Nobody said
right.
that.
Even Pawan said, oh, maybe what she has on the palm probably is a blood clot, but we didn't know that it was life-threatening or something that we need to rush to the ER. Right. So that evening she started getting a headache. And I myself have migraines regularly every month. I get severe migraines, I throw up, but I get a good night's sleep and the next day I'm normal. So I thought Ritu is also having a migraine, and but the pain just started shooting up. Usually her headaches, even if she gets them once in a while, they are not this severe. She doesn't take medication for her headaches, they are very minimal. But this time her pain was such a shooting pain. She was like, mommy, my head is hurting. So I started walking with her in the balcony just to distract her away. And she says, I'm feeling nauseous. And I know how bad those vomitings could be. So I started trying to divert her attention, but she started throwing up. It didn't stop. And I gave her Crocin, she threw up. I gave her a sip of water, she threw up. I gave her just a sip of coconut water, she threw up. And she kept throwing up every 20 to 30 minutes, and she kept track. She said, Mama, I threw up for 6 times. And it was around 10:30 in the night. I tried to call the doctor that I spoke to in the morning. He was not available. He didn't give me his personal number. I asked him, can I have your personal number? He said, I can't give it because there's so many patients who try to reach me. So I tried to message him. He didn't reply back. So I called my uncle, Dr. Uncle, the surgeon, and he looked at her in the video chat and he started questioning her, Ritu, how much is this? How much is this? And she was answering. And then he said her lips look dehydrated. And I told him that I see a purple patch on her eyelid. And he said, okay, now that means you need to go to the ER. Maybe she needs some IV fluids. So we rushed her to Apollo, and we went to Apollo. First thing they asked is, what is the problem? We told them that she has headache and she's throwing up. And they said, oh, then it's a COVID case. I said, how can you declare it as a COVID case without even testing her? Then we had to put her in the waiting room until they could do the blood work and all. And we said, we are not going to put her in the COVID ward until her COVID results come positive. So there was this small pavilion, they had beds, so they started putting her there and they started giving her fluids and pain medication. But in spite of giving her the pain medication, the headache didn't go down. So they somehow got hold of the doctor whom I spoke to earlier in the morning, and he immediately referred her to the neurologist. And the neurologist said to get her an MRI. This was around 2:30 in the morning. And we tried to get the MRI, and the sound bothered her so much, and she was signaling me, please stop, stop. And she said, Mama, this is a torture. I cannot bear it. So poor thing, she couldn't cooperate because she already has a headache. And the sound was even more horrible. But the technician told us right away, there's a problem in her brain, get her admitted. I didn't believe him, to be honest. How can a healthy child have a problem in the brain? There was absolutely no symptoms ever. And we were back in the pavilion waiting for the doctor to come up. And the doctor came, it was around 6:30 maybe. He said, we got all the blood report. She doesn't have COVID. COVID test is negative, but her platelets went down to 30,000. And the MRI, we couldn't complete it, but with the report we have, she seems to have a clot in her brain. So we need to immediately start investigating. So we got her admitted. And once we got her admitted, within few hours, probably like
within an hour
or so, she got seizures right in front of our eyes. She got seizures and the doctors took her away. She was surrounded by like 10 or 12 doctors trying to revive her. She was put on the ventilator. And meanwhile, my uncle comes in and he starts talking to other doctors. I don't know when they did a CT scan in between, but they showed him that she has a clot and she has hemorrhage, and the pressure is so much that her brain is damaged enough, so they need to do an emergency surgery right away. We were in a state of shock. We didn't know what was happening. The girl was just fine yesterday, just walking around.
She walked to ER.
She walked to ER. Walked in the sense, another thing to point is, when we went to ER, she couldn't walk much. She started limping. Her left leg started folding. So we asked for a wheelchair. So at least 24 hours or 18 hours before or 12 hours before, she was perfectly fine at home. And then they said, we need to do a surgery. So she went in for a surgery. Is it craniectomy? Is what they did, where they basically open up a part of the bone of the skull and keep it aside, so the pressure of the brain can be released. She had so much pressure building up from the hemorrhage that it was damaging the other parts of the brain. And that's it. Doctors didn't say anything that day. The next morning, this all happened on the 9th of June. 10th of June, the doctors come in for rounds every morning at 9. So they called us for a meeting. And Mr. Alok Jain, who is the surgeon, told us, look, the condition she has is called CVST, cerebral venous sinus thrombosis.
And also at that time, they said the root cause is ITP, idiopathic thrombosis something.
No, actually he said we don't know yet. It could be idiopathic thrombosis. Means it happens in people, but we don't know why it happens. And he said two things. First thing is there's a 50-50% chance of her survival. I really am concerned about her survival. And even if she survives, the quality of life she has, because we're looking at her CT scans and her brain has been extensively damaged. I was totally in disbelief what I'm hearing. I just didn't know what happened. How could something happen so fast? And he said, yes, clots happen, brain clots happen. It's common, but usually when people get it, they see symptoms over a month. But the way your daughter got it, it's acute thrombosis within a short span of time. And you came at the right time. You didn't delay anywhere, but it happened like a storm. It started like a drizzle, but it happened like a storm. And we're doing whatever we can. So let's hope for the best. And it's too early to say anything. She will be under sedation for the next 2 days because we do that so the brain gets time to heal, rest and heal. But after that, the next 48 hours are going to be critical because she needs to wake up on her own when the sedation goes down. And the medicines can do only so much. The brain needs to activate by itself. And that's it. The next few days, if you want to add anything, they did every possible test to see if she had an underlying condition, all possible tests, the hematologists and all were involved to see if she had an underlying condition which caused it, and everything was negative. They couldn't find anything to link it to.
Yeah, we wanted them to test so that, that directs the treatment properly. They did all the tests and they couldn't find anything.
So in between, I heard from the doctors. Until then, I didn't know. This could be a vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia. That was the first time I heard from the doctors. They said, because we are not finding anything, it could be vaccine-induced or it could be COVID, where she got COVID and you didn't know she recovered, or it probably could be the after effects of COVID. I'm like, and why can't we check for COVID antibodies? They said because she already got the vaccine, the antibodies will be there in the body. So there's no way to test that out. But what we did was we tested our little one, our younger daughter, because Ritu and her sleep together and they play together. So if she must have got COVID, then she should also have gotten COVID. She's the only one who's not vaccinated in our house at this point. She didn't have any COVID antibodies. So that clearly shows that Ritu did not have COVID. And I think she was tested again before donating the organs. That time also she did not have COVID.
RT-PCR 3 times they did, and 3 times it was
negative. And after 5 days or 6 days, on 15th of June, they said, we tried everything. There was some kind of a shock she got last night. Her pupil movement, whatever was there, has gone down. And there's no electrical signals or active brainstem activity in her brain. And at this point, we consider her brain dead. This is Tuesday, 15th of June. They declared her brain dead. And they gave us options, whatever you want to do with her. They gave us 3 options. You can take her home and just let her pass away. We will remove the life support. Or 2, just wait until she naturally, ceases, rest of the body ceases to function. Or 3, you can donate her organs. But I, as a mom, was not ready to give up. To be honest, I didn't trust them. I said, how can she be brain dead just in 6 days? And they said, we will still support you, whatever other therapies or options you want to try. Alternative medicines, we will completely support you. So at that point, we started Ayurveda immediately. And my husband started researching about stem cell therapy and gene therapy, where we would try to regenerate the brain cells. but nothing worked. Nothing worked.
Yeah, for the stem cell therapy, they needed blood circulation to the brain, which we had to test again. And
so they did an MRI with the
MRI.
angio, and the result was not in favor. They said there was absolutely no blood flow from the neck onwards to the brain.
So no medicine would work.
So no medicine would work. And they said, at this point, we supported you for the past 4 days, but her brain is at a point where it's degenerating and it's liquefying.
Started to liquefy and leak.
So what I was thinking was a blood at the spot of the stitches. They say it's not blood, it's actually the brain that's liquefying. And they said it's unethical on your part to keep her in this condition. I said, can't we take her home and continue to keep her on the ventilator? I was still hoping maybe she'll come back from brain dead. Maybe some miracle will happen. All the prayers going around the world for her will work. But they said, again, it's unethical. You need to understand her brain is liquefying and there's no way she's going to come back. And at that point, my husband literally begged me, saying, you know what? I don't think she'll come back, but let her live through others. Look at her urine. Her urine pouch was constantly filling up. She has excellent kidneys, and the doctor said her body is in perfect condition. An 18-year-old whose organs are all in perfect condition. Let her continue to live in others, though we cannot see her physically. So that was the toughest decision in my entire life, to just let her go. So we had to sign the paperwork, and then so we could continue with the process of Jeevan Dan. And the entire day I spent with her, still hoping maybe she'll get up with my touch, but it didn't happen. On the 20th of June, early hours at 1:30 a.m. is when they took her to the OT operation theater. And I still don't know how I could send her away.
And in between, somehow government got interfered in this case. And the professor from medical college from government was sent for autopsy. And they did autopsy. I don't know what triggered that, but that happened. And there was a delay in our discharge. And we don't know what happened in the autopsy. We are yet to get the report. We contacted hospital, and hospital contacted the health department who triggered the autopsy. Even they did not get the report yet. So we still don't know what was the findings in autopsy.
But I called the doctor, the counselor, day before yesterday, and I asked her if she heard back anything from, if they got back any report from the autopsy, and they said no. And it's been 2 weeks today since it happened, and they said we haven't received anything yet. And I asked, can you at least ask the doctors if they were able to conclude what the reason was? And they continue to say the same. Number one, it could be VITT, vaccine-induced.
Presumptive, that's what they said. Presumptive VITT or COVID. And they said COVID could have been caused by vaccine also. That's another thing they said, which is very confusing. Towards the end, recently we found out about AEFI, and we were trying to make sure that is filed. And during those investigations, we found that government themselves has reported it to, like the health department or vaccination department themselves had reported it to government. I don't know exactly what that report means, whether it's AEFI or some other kind of report. Tomorrow we are going to go to that vaccination center and figure this out, and try to make sure that AEFI is reported and we get that report and the national ID number. So some kind of reporting to government has been done. We have to ensure that it is proper AEFI. That's where we are now.
I just would like to add that when I talk to people or doctors, they say it's 1 in a lakh or 1 in a million. But ask the person, the family who have lost their loved ones.
1 in million is not true, because
1 in million is not true.
Because I have reports in some countries it's 1 in 26,000, and in some countries in 1 in 1 lakh. I think it all depends on the transparency of the society and the country. So we are not being transparent. We are not recording the cases. I think it's a lot more than one. It's not even close to 1 in a million. It's a lot more.
Now that we are, see, after this happened to us, I feel it shouldn't happen to any other parent. It's devastating. Like a healthy child, who has a bright future, an 18-year-old who was supposed to go to college in a couple of months, just lost her life for no reason. And it shouldn't happen to anybody else. So we started this campaign to raise awareness. It's called Ritu's Vaccine Awareness Campaign. And I hear from some of the doctors saying it's a rare adverse event. It's 1 in a million. The benefit outweighs the risk. What does it mean? Doesn't that one life have any value? All I'm saying is people need to be educated. We didn't know about any of this. Maybe if I was informed.
See, even if there was a blood clot line in some kind of a warning, and if they said it could be life-threatening, they have to say that, because it is life-threatening, and it should be a warning to everybody. And they could have maybe come early, if not saved life, some form or that they could have written.
I feel if I had known that Covishield could cause such an issue, right after she got her vaccine, I could have done her blood work or done something if I was informed by the doctors, or if the company provided that information to us, and maybe should have been still living in some shape or form. If not in perfect health, at least should still be alive. That lack of information is what is really missing.
Yeah, that is the main thing we want to push for, the information and the warning. And so many media all over the world, they have been saying blood clot. Nobody says life-threatening blood clot.
Correct.
And I don't think people realize how life-threatening the blood clots could be.
I myself did not, but during our investigations on how to file it, it looks like vaccination department has filed on behalf of us to the government, but we are not sure. We will know for sure unless I see the report. I won't believe it.
We are trying to get that case number if they filed it, and we are still not able to get hold of the right person who might have that number. And as you mentioned yesterday, we tried to go to CoWIN and see if it was linked, and we haven't found it yet under Ritu's registration. We haven't found AEFI yet.
Yes, there were a couple of calls from health department. They said we are calling from health department, and they asked some nonsense questions. Where do you work? What is your full name? Some couple of questions like that, nothing related to the case. And I just had to answer that, and I answered, and they just kept the phone. I got 2 calls from the health department. They said some doctor from some health department.
When was that?
It was after we took Ritu home, like the next day or something.
So probably 20th or 21st?
Yeah, 20th or 21st.